Russian drone attack on a residential building overnight in the northeastern border town of Lviv. For insight into the shifting U.S. stance on support for Ukraine, I spoke to Democratic Congresswoman from Minnesota, Betty McCollum. She serves as the ranking member of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense. Congresswoman, I first just want to get your thoughts on hearing that Ukraine is already using U.S. weapons to strike into Russian territory.
Well, I'm sure the Ukrainian soldiers and the Ukrainian civilian population are very relieved that the president has now expanded their use. It's something that I, along with many members of Congress, have wanted to have happen for a long time. The Ukrainian government and military have been very judicious to always avoid civilian casualties, and they need to use these weapons to protect their own civilians. So I'm glad that they were given a green light to use them in this Kurdish region a little more.
Do you think it comes too little too late, that this is not going to be able to make an impact on the battlefield?
It's never too late. It would have been nice for it to happen earlier, but I understand where our NATO allies and President Biden were coming from. The concern that Russia would call this a provocation, which they have, and an escalation, which the Russians have, are really wrong. Russia invaded Ukraine unjustly over 1,000 days ago, and the fact that we are seeing North Korean troops being used now in the Russian army to continue this unjustified war against Ukraine. I think Russia has clearly shown that they're the provocateurs on here, and they need to be held accountable. And we need to protect civilian infrastructure and civilian lives in Ukraine to the best of our ability by letting the Ukrainian soldiers use these weapons.
But were the concerns from the U.S. side and from European allies justified? We've now seen Russia release a new nuclear doctrine saying an attack from a non-nuclear state, if backed by a nuclear power, will be treated as a joint assault on Russia. I mean, this is a message to the U.S., isn't it?
It is. And this is the difference between democracies and countries like Russia, autocracies, and communist countries around the world. Democracies always seek diplomacy first. We always try to find a solution to a problem and not make a problem get worse. And we just see Russia never take advantage of an opportunity to have dialogue, to dial back, and to admit what they did was wrong and withdraw their troops from the occupied areas in Ukraine.
But even if there isn't perhaps the immediate concern that Russia would deploy nuclear weapons, as is the implied threat behind this, we've heard concerns about hybrid warfare. So Russia's foreign minister said in Rio, quote, "We will be taking this as a renewed face of the Western war against Russia, and we will react accordingly." We've heard Russia might arm U.S. allies like the Houthi rebels in Yemen.
Well, there was a report in the paper today that Russian weapons, I believe it was the Wall Street Journal, Russian weapons have been found in Lebanon. So Russia and Iran have been working together to sow, terror in these other countries and using them as proxies to carry out their attacks against democracies. Democracies have to stand together, and that was something that took away from me when I was in Munich prior to Russia's invasion. Democracies finally were like, you know what, whether it was Germany, Japan, the NATO allies, it was like, it's our time to stand up and say democratic nations will not be silent when another one is attacked without any provocation for no reason at all.
Does that still stand with the incoming Trump administration? Do you think this policy, for example, to greenlight weapons being used in Russian territory, to hit Russian territory, that will still stand under President Trump?
I would hope so. President Trump will be making his own decisions. I've been taken back by some of the things that he and some of the people that he's talked about putting in cabinet positions with their misinformation and basically repeating Russian propaganda at times about how this is Russian territory, that Russia deserves to be in Ukraine, that Ukraine itself can't make a decision on whether it joins the European Union. Ukraine's not allowed to make a decision what to do for its own defense, that Ukraine would be a puppet of Russia if Russia had its way. And Ukraine is an emerging democracy under a threat of a country, Russia, that doesn't want to see democracy flourish.